friends. It is January the 14th. We made it through our reading of genealogy. Said that word right this time. And now we're into more familiar territory. We're back into people that we know, stories that we've heard. Maybe some of us have read up to the point of certain story of this part of the story. Maybe we haven't read it all, or we've forgotten some of it, but we are going to dive into a part that's probably not talked about very much, and that's the story of Judah and Tamar. And just kind of take a look at Judah's life and actually what he's doing with his life, and how he kind of got off course, and what caused that. But the story of Joseph is a beloved story. We have heard that. Many of us, I don't want to assume that everyone has read the story of Joseph, but many of us have heard that since we were little. And in our I grew up with felt boards. This just tells you how old I am, but we had the little felt boards with the story, and we got to put the little characters on the felt board. Do y'all even know what felt boards are? But that's how we told the stories. And we would be sipping on our orange high C juice with our, I think we got like 2 vanilla wafers and a saltine cracker. That was our snack. But I digress. Sorry, let me get back on track here. So I've heard this story for a long time. And as I said, many of you probably have as well. But Judah is the 4th son of Jacob. And the older sons that should be more responsible and should be caring for the younger sons. But we see that he was in on the scheme from the very beginning to try to get rid of Joseph. And, you know, there's so many different angles that we could look at with this story, and so many different places that we can study. But we can see how the brothers, just without going into too much detail, we can see how the brothers were a little bit irritated from Joseph's behavior and the way he acted. And but, you know, nothing really warranted what happened to him. Nothing. But regardless, it happened. They've come back. They have told the dad. They have said, you know, your son has been killed. And of course, dad's heartbroken. I mean, he's heartbroken. His favorite son is believed to be dead. And then we see in verse 36, meanwhile, the Mennonite traders arrived in Egypt, where they sold Joseph to Potiphar, an officer of Pharaoh, the king of Egypt. Potiphar was the captain of the palace guard, period. And then we see, about this time, Judah left home and moved to Adullam, where he stayed with a man named Hirah. Now, I thought this was really interesting. Is period the end, Joseph's gone, now Judah's gone. And I thought it's interesting, and it warrants us looking at Judah and why would he not stay around? We don't see that any of the other brothers left. They all stayed there. And that's a story for another day of how they lived in the sin of what they did around their father. Wow. And we'll unpack that a little bit more as the lessons build and we learn more and go into more of Joseph's story. But as far as Judah is concerned, life on the run is never a good thing. And it appears that he just had to get out of there. You know, Judah was the one that wanted to go and get him from the well. He didn't want him to be killed, but he did partake in the part of them, selling him to the Mennonites. So you have to know that there's guilt there for what he did. And he decided that a life on the run was better than living there with what he had done and facing his dad every single day and watching his dad mourn. And so I just wanted to talk about his life and his story here and what our response is to sin in our life. we have the choice to face our sin or flee from our sin. And that means to turn away and not address it, and to allow it to separate us from those that we have sinned against or sinned with, to allow it to separate us from our Father, and allow it to stir in our spirit and interrupt our communication with the Holy Spirit. So it's an interesting topic for me specifically right now, because my verse this year that I'm spotlighting and that I'm praying through is forgiveness. And that is for the Lord, allowing the Lord to examine my heart and to bring up parts of my life that there's unconfessed sin, but also that I have grudges and sin and hard feelings against other people. So I think it's interesting that the Lord is having us study this lesson. And as I said, maybe another time, a lot of these lessons are what God's teaching me, and y'all are having to listen to it. So that may be good and that may be bad. I'm not sure. But so let's look at what's happened here with Judah. When we flee from sin, we make bad decisions based on sin-stained emotions. We base our decision on sin-stained emotions. He is eaten up with this. He could not even bear to be around his brothers or his father. He had to leave. He had to leave. So he made the decision to leave and go to a place that he shouldn't have gone, but also to make the decision to join with into an ungodly relationship with a Canaanite woman. And I say ungodly because history has already told us that the Lord does not want his people to be united with the Canaanites. But yet it continues to happen. Esau did. And you see the joining of the Canaanites and the Israelites, and they're not supposed to be, but they are. And it causes trouble. And you will read about it and see about it throughout the entire Old Testament. Constant. This is just the beginning of the intermarriages that should not have happened. But the sin-stained emotions that he had caused him to leave, not only leave, but also make the bad decision to leave, and the bad decision to get into a marriage that God did not want him to be a part of. So we have to be really careful when our emotions are stained with sin. They're going to they will lead us to make really bad decisions, but they will also, when we flee from sin, we will involve other people. He has involved a woman, and now he's brought children into this marriage. And they're unruly children, they're evil children, and the Lord takes them. And then it becomes this whole heritage and this whole not having anybody to leave, not having an heir, and marrying your brother's wife and trying to get them pregnant so they'll have an heir. I know this is mixed up, but this is the way it was. And Onan didn't want to do that, and it was just a mess. So all of these people are involved in a decision that was made that is sin-stained emotions. It just continues to involve other people, and it leads us to have more and more sin. He ends up lying to Tamar and saying, I'm going to bring this younger son to you. And I know that sounds kind of really weird, that his baby young son will end up with the woman. It's just a mess. I understand that. This is another one of those things that could be on the late night dramas. But we have got to learn to run to God with our sin rather than run from God and our sin. Because 1 John 1:9 says that he is faithful to forgive us. We forget that because we're not faithful to forgive one another. And as I said a little while ago, that's what the Lord is really working on me. with this year in 2019, because we are not faithful to forgive one another. We don't really believe God is going to forgive us, but He does. And He will forgive our sin. He has forgiven our sin, but we have to acknowledge that sin to God, because that sin is going to separate us from God. So He is faithful. He is very, very faithful to forgive our sin. So we can't flee from it. We have to stand and face it with God and accept His forgiveness. Not only accept His forgiveness, but then forgive ourselves. The brothers had a hard time doing that. And you'll see as you read through the story, you're going to feel the emotions of the brothers and what a struggle that they had. And then eventually accepting forgiveness, but also forgiving themselves. And we have to do that. And that's really a lesson for another day. But the point of this message, is this. Don't flee from sin. Run to God with it. Take it to Him. He knows about it anyways. He's faithful to forgive it. And we need to forgive ourselves and move on. And don't make decisions that are based on sin-stained emotions. It's going to lead us down the wrong path every single time. Y'all have a wonderful day, and I will see you tomorrow right here on Read Through the Word.